or people who are helping them with their recruiting who are talking about, well, you got to test your 2K. Their parents are talking about their 2K. So that's all they're hearing. And so for me, the maturity side of it would be so huge in the recruiting process to know that, wow, I'm talking to a kid that really understands the bigger picture of training. And that would probably incline me to even want that athlete more because guess what we do in college? 6K, 30-minute, we're not testing 2K in September, and we're not talking about it over the summer. So you're going to be better prepared, for the next step if you can understand the bigger picture of how the training cycle all connects together. A fast 5K is going to put out a fast 2K at some point.
Anyway, let's get started. Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right. So for everyone listening, we have Delaney McGuire here for round number three on the At the 1000 Training Podcast. And I texted Delaney at the end of last week. I was like, hey, can we hop on and do a summer training podcast for high school athletes, college athletes, anyone who's trying to just stick, focus this summer, really prioritize their training and move the needle forward with their fitness now in the off season. And Delaney was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's jump on and just have a really informal conversation about how to set athletes up for summer success. And we have a couple of topics that we definitely are prioritized, hitting here in the initial part, and we'll kind of see how things run. But if you do not know Delaney, she is the first ever third time, guest on the show. So with that, we can save most of her introduction, for going back and listening to those previous episodes that we did. But Delaney, to kick things off, I just want to kind of spend a couple minutes. Tell me a little bit about, the summer, what you guys got in store. Maybe give the athletes a little bit of a shout out in terms of where you're going to be this summer, so that if they want to get in contact with you, let's start there and let's jump into some really fun topics. But why don't we start with that?
Yeah, cool. So yeah, obviously collegiate rowing team is home for the summer training, but we're pretty busy. Things are ramping up recruiting wise. So I was just telling Kevin before this, I'll be down at Independence Day Regatta in Philly at the end of the week. I'll be at RowFest in July. And then I think our staff is planning on getting out to Canadian Henley in August, as well as Mega Worlds that's going on up in St. Catharines as well. So we're around. We've got some camps still going on back in Michigan. I'll be out in Philly working with Kevin for the next couple of weeks, which will be good. And then we've got some Learn to Row camps going on back at home through July and August. So pretty busy for us recruiting wise. But it's fun. It's nice. It's nice to have the time to just focus on that. And, you're not worried about practice in the morning and, all the things that come along with that. So a lot of phone calls, text messages, emails. It's good though. So.
Awesome. And Delaney kind of alluded to it, but also just to give everyone, who is a first time listener, Delaney is at Eastern Michigan University, and she's been spending, she's been there for quite some time and really crushing it there. But she also alluded to it. And also, but last thing before we get to that, if you are listening to this, go give her a shout at one of those regattas at IDR or RowFest and all those other ones, because she'll be hustling to meet some athletes. But she'll also be coming over to Bryn Mawr. Well, I guess technically her hometown anyway, her home area anyway, but she'll be helping us out with summer program. And Delaney and I work really well together in helping position athletes for, or just training. And we are very similar in terms of our philosophy on training. And that's some of the stuff that we're really going to talk about today for any athlete out there, just with how do you bridge the gap from end of spring season. You just wrapped up championship racing. Now, maybe for some of you, maybe a month ago. For others, maybe you were able to go to youth nats or whatever it may be, or, NCAAs, IRAs if you're a college athlete, and you're just looking for some things to think about for this summer to help bridge the gap from end of spring through the summer and better prepare you for the fall. And I think, Delaney, some of the areas that I want to start with is just for athletes identifying goals that they can center their training around for the summer. And I think those goals can be very dependent on the athlete. Obviously, I think it can extend as far as athletes who just want to be better prepared for the fall season. It can also talk about athletes who have very specific goals, like, hey, I want to make a 1V, in the fall. I want to go to the head of the Charles. I want to better my comfort on the erg. I want to get stronger. I want to get, faster on the erg, whatever it may be. They can kind of, again, the goals can vary from athlete to athlete, but I think that's kind of where we want to kick things off. And Delaney, I'll kind of start with you. Like, what do you think are appropriate goals? And again, you can think about it from a college standpoint for your athletes at home right now, maybe some of the things that you guys talked about for athletes between late May and September. And then also we can kind of take that into more the high school athlete as they are kind of thinking about the same thing, but maybe they're throwing in the recruiting aspect or, goals for selection down in the fall. Like, let's start with that. But what are some goals and what are some things that athletes can begin to center their training around from a big picture standpoint? And then we can start to slowly funnel that down into more of the details within that training program.
Yeah, for me, I always think of there's like a couple of different buckets that you can fill in the summer. And a lot of it is like have a conversation with your coach, whether you're in high school or college. Like if you're wondering kind of what you need to get to where you want to go, ask, right? But there's first biggest bucket that like I'm always going to advocate for is most important is just your general aerobic fitness bucket. And that's just like time on task, whether it's on the erg or cross training, or rowing, whichever one you want to choose, spending some time building your aerobic fitness. You're never going to be wrong to do that, no matter what you're prepping for in the fall, whether it's head of the Charles, erg testing, or just like, I just want to be fit when I get back with my team. So never going to be wrong to spend some time on that. And then like the next bucket I think of, and this is definitely very athlete specific, is like your deficiencies. And that could be in mobility, in strength, in maybe recovery. Like maybe you really hit it hard this year and you need to focus on some recovery modalities as you get into your summer training and allow your body to rebuild and recover a little bit before you start to train really hard again. And like to go along with that, I guess like strength is part of that too. Like, we had one athlete who came to us at the end of the year, asking like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to come back ready to go next year? And we talked to her about working on her general strength a little bit. Like she's really, really aerobically fit, but she could use a little more of like the power side of it, a little more muscle on it to really kind of drop the hammer a little bit more, both on the water and on the machine. So it kind of spans across all of those things. But for me, no matter what, the aerobic fitness side of it is always number one. You're never wrong to get out, in the boat for an hour, get on the erg for an hour. That's never going to hurt you, in my opinion.
And you highlighted one that I thought was really good. Like, or the first thing you said was like, maybe it is worth a conversation with your coach. Where it's like, hey, like if you're a high school athlete and you haven't had a conversation with your coach about things that you can work on, if you're a college athlete and you haven't set up a one-on-one to kind of think about things that you can prioritize in the summer, it's like I think the beauty of the summer is you have, depending on your schedule and are you doing, do you have work commitments? Do you have family vacations, which are a huge thing that athletes have to balance? Maybe you're doing a summer rowing program and it's more racing focused and you need to kind of figure out some time to prioritize training. But I think one of the things that we do have in the summer is we, in theory, hopefully have more time than we do in the fall and in the spring, when you also throw on practice 5 to 6 times a week. You throw on racing every single weekend. In theory, especially with the school bucket that you don't have to worry about as much, you should have more time to take a step back and focus on your own development as an athlete. And I think that's the big piece. And you may think what the areas are that you need to work on, but I bet your coach probably has an even better objective, bird's eye view understanding of who you are as an athlete and what you can work on. Right now, again, it's dependent on your coach and your relationship with that coach. But I think that's a really good, interesting place to start, where it's like, if you don't know what areas you should be prioritizing, maybe you talk to your coach and you ask them like, hey, coach, can I get 5-10 minutes to just have a conversation, because I'm trying to structure my training here over the next couple months. And I'm trying to get a little bit more direction. And you'd be surprised where if they just say one thing, that can help guide you moving forward, right? If they just say, hey, you know what? I really noticed that you struggled to get a little bit of power on the machine, right? You really struggled to kind of get the watts up, right? Get the split down when we're at low intensity or low stroke rates. Maybe really prioritize strength, right? That's just an example, but starting with talking to your coach. And then you also highlighted the aerobic piece. And I think that's another really important piece, because the beauty of aerobic work is, number one, it's the number one contributor to effective, just, base level training, right? And actually, even for peak performance, right? That foundational element is without question the endurance piece, the aerobic piece. And that's always should be the centerpiece as an endurance athlete, but also with that, it's also not that hard to do. It's easy volume that, whether you are out of sorts, you have a summer job, you can only train at night, you have to wake up in the morning, you have, you're on vacation, you're just trying to log some meters through running, or there's a hotel gym you can hop on the bike. We can fit in aerobic work very, very easily, and it's not going to tax us physically, and it's also not going to tax us too much mentally. I think that's a really important piece. But with that, Delaney, I'm going to kind of kick things off to you as well, but I think you highlighted it a little bit as well. You talked about the aerobic side. You talked about maybe also for some athletes talking about the strength training piece. I think both of us are in agreement that in the summertime, there isn't one modality that you should focus on 100% of the time, right? Even if it's the erg, even if it's on the water rowing, you need a diversity of different training modalities, strength, mobility, aerobics, even just some really basic core, exercise and stuff like that to continue to refine and build structure with your body. But start there, if you don't mind, just with balanced training. Like if you were to look at an athlete who is just trying to bridge that gap, where should they begin in creating more structure to their training?
Yeah. So something that I always tell athletes who ask me, what should I do? Where should I start? The first thing I'll always say is, what modality do you enjoy the most? And start there. And a lot of times the modality they enjoy the most is not the erg, which, okay. But if the erg's not your favorite, can you still incorporate it? So maybe you're a runner, you love running. Great. Okay, the thing you like the most is the thing you're going to be more willing to do. You're going to spend more time on it because you enjoy it. So no matter what, I would prefer you getting minutes in over no minutes in. So if you're going to get the minutes in running, do it. But how can we sprinkle in, maybe you start in June, just one erg a week. Pick one day, you're not going to run, you're going to get on the machine. And then maybe in July, you go to 2 ergs. Okay. And then again, August, ramp it up to 3 ergs, right? As you're getting closer to your season starting. On the aerobic side of things, I think that's pretty reasonable. And a lot of times, especially on the collegiate side, you have athletes who are coming from swimming background, coming from running background, coming from these other fitness backgrounds, which is great. So I always tell them hey, if you want to get in the pool and swim, do it. If you know you're going to log the minutes by getting in the pool, I would much rather you log the minutes than just sit there and hem and haw over I don't want to get on the erg. I'm just not going to do anything today. So number one, the thing you like the most is the thing you're going to do. And then on top of that, now how do you sprinkle in the thing that you don't like the most, but is good for you, that you need. And then on top of that, then you have things that I think of as supplemental. They shouldn't be your main focus of training over the summer, but they're fun and they can enhance whatever aerobic training you're doing. So that's your strength training, your mobility work, your core work, that stuff is all important too, but that's kind of the topping to everything else, I think I texted you earlier about common mistakes that I see sometimes in summer training. And it's like the athletes that just hit the weight room every day, which I understand you love the weight room. That's great. Like, I love that too. There's nothing wrong with hitting the weight room, but understand that we're an aerobic sport and that you're going to come back in the fall. You're going to be really strong, but you're going to miss on that aerobic side of things a little bit. So how do you mesh the two a little bit more? Like, sprinkle in some of the stuff you don't like, bring the erg into it a little bit. Like, but yeah, like all of it's important, but number one, the modality that you like, do that, do it every day, do it for 45 minutes to an hour.
All right, what's up, everyone? Quick interruption to the podcast to tell you about the Erg First, Row Second online course. This course is designed for athletes who are 0 to 3 years into their rowing career who are looking to better understand and maximize the concept to erg, because we all know the erg matters, and there is no better tool for developing rowing-specific fitness. And this course offers 3.5 hours worth of content and instruction to help you truly set a foundation that can set you up for long-term success. We're going to be talking about proper erg setup. We're going to be talking about controlling your environment. We're also taking a deep dive into rowing technique and also a really high-level view of training programs and allowing you to actually set up a path that can help guide you moving forward. So if you're interested, go to the website courses.at1000.com and go check it out. Because again, if you're 0 to 3 years into your rowing career, you want to have that stable foundation that you can start stacking bricks upon, where the erg is something that you are comfortable with. It's something that you appreciate, and it's something that you can best utilize in order to guide you moving forward. And that's what this course is all about. So check it out. Let us know if you have any questions. Talk to you soon. Now back to the show. Peace. What do you feel is a good, like if you look at it from the bird's eye view and you look down on someone's, weekly training program, given, whatever else they have going on in their schedule, but we'll just take like the prototypical athlete. They may have a summer job that's in the afternoons, or maybe it's in the mornings, whatever it is. But I think if you had to kind of, if you were kind of structuring someone's training from the start, and again, goals aside, right, what their ultimate outcome is aside, right, because some are different. But I think from just the where do puzzle pieces fit kind of aspect, how would you kind of look at someone's training and just be like, okay, like you probably, like in an ideal world, we're training 6 days a week with 1 day off, right? You may, for some, you may have 8 sessions per week. For others, you may have just 6. We probably want more than 4 or 5. And how does that look? What could be a breakdown of that balance if, say, we're only doing 6 sessions, and then maybe if we're doing 8, right? And for some who have really, really, specific goals, they may be going up to a 9 or a 10 sessions per week. But I'd say most are falling between that 6 to maybe 8. How would you look at that balance for them? And you kind of can, put things into buckets of rowing/erg specific, cross training, different modalities, and then maybe strength/supplemental work. How would you look at that, for that kind of, for a week?
Yeah. So I always think when you have less time, the quality has to go up. So, some people get into summer jobs or things over the summer where, you might only have 5 days maybe that you're really able to like set aside a good 45 minutes each day to get something done. And if that's the case, like that's just what it is. And you're going to find a way to figure it out. But I think the less time you have, the higher the quality needs to be. So whatever you're doing, whether it's you're getting on the erg, you're getting on a run, you're getting in the weight room. And I would say like, if you only have 5 days, like you should say maybe 90% of those sessions are geared towards like your aerobic fitness, because that's still going to be the most important building block for you. And the more consistency you can get there is going to be favorable for you. So, maybe you're doing 4 aerobic sessions and 1 strength training session, or whatever, 1, strength core mobility day. But making sure the quality then is really, really good with whatever you're doing. So you have a target zone that you want to be in for, that particular workout, whether you're doing just steady state, or maybe you're like throwing in a little bit, something a little bit harder, but just make sure that you're targeting and hitting that target with intentionality when you have less time. I always think, you know, and the more time you have, the more you can afford to kind of like, you know, you get a long warm up in, you know, you have time for all of that other supplemental stuff more when you have more time. So it's kind of, you know, again, you have to know what the most important thing is and be able to prioritize. So like, again, I think it's aerobic fitness, strength, and then it's, you know, the core work, the mobility, all of that stuff, you know, like what's going to benefit you the most when you get back in September, right?
I like that. And I think like the way I always say to athletes, it's like, okay, like I'll say, okay, in an ideal world, I think we're plus or minus one of 6 sessions per week, right? It's like maybe like I think ideally athletes are targeting that. And it's like, can you get in, you know, it's almost like if it's 6 sessions a week, let's just go with that. If you're only able to train 6 sessions per week, can you get in almost like 2-2-2 in many ways, right? Where it's like, okay, like you have your right, because I'm of the belief personally that if athletes truly want to get better on the erg, they should probably be on the erg at least twice a week, 12 months a year, 52 weeks a year. Like I just, it's such an important piece to our training, you know, as rowers, that I don't see why it needs to go to the wayside until Thanksgiving break, you know, when it's cold out up here in the Northeast. Like if you want to get better on the erg, you got to be on the erg, but you don't have to be doing intense stuff on the erg all the time. And I look at the summer, especially, like to me, it's called like I call it mindless meters, or low stakes meters is even probably a better way to say it. It's like low stakes meters where there's nothing tied to selection. You're not worried about your scores. You're not worried, but it's an opportunity for you to get more comfortable on the erg without having teammates on your right or your left in theory, or a coach, you know, breathing down your neck being like, hey, go this split or this split. Like you have an opportunity to acclimate yourself to the erg. So it should be an important piece in my mind, right? I don't care if we're in the middle of July or it's February, March, or April. Like the erg can be an important piece. With that being said, it doesn't have to be the only piece. And in many ways, especially in June, and I guess now we're about to bridge the gap to July, it doesn't necessarily have to be the majority piece. It's like, can it be 50% of your training, right? Or maybe even just 2 times a week to start, and then you're slowly building it up. But then with that, it's like what you said about picking what you enjoy. Like that's probably one of the greatest things that we can say on this entire episode. It's like, what do you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy running? Do you enjoy swimming? What are you also good at? What are you good at? Right. And some of that can be like, okay, like I'm a pretty good runner. Well, great. Then I can figure out measurable targets for running and see if I'm getting any faster over the course of the summer. Same thing with swimming or on the bike, whatever it may be. But probably a third of that training could be focused on really valuable cross training. And then the lifting, I think, piece comes in, right? Strength training. And I think to me, there's a couple ways to do that as well, where it's like, it doesn't have to be much. It just has to be present, where you're just continuing to think about the long-term development as an athlete. And you're continuing to, and with that, right, strength training is helpful for performance, but also it's really helpful for just injury prevention. And when else are you really going to do it? Is it going to be a focal point of your fall or your spring? Probably not, especially if you're a high school rower, right? Like at the college level, it's different, right? That's a consistent piece to your training all year round. At the high school level, most coaches are prioritizing water time. And if they're doing any strength training, it's body weight circuits, you know, before or after practice. But when else for athletes out there are you going to be able to do a little bit of strength / athletic movement? And I think one of the ways where you can do that without burning an entire gap in your schedule with another session, it's like you could even put it on the end of an aerobic session, right? Where it's like, okay, if I'm doing 45 minutes of steady state and I'm trying to incorporate a little bit of strength training, can I do a half-hour lift after? Like those are also other ways to be a little bit more efficient with your time, which I think is another big piece for athletes. It's like, can you be a little bit more effective? Like if you're only training 5 or 6 days a week, and the reason you're doing that is because you have all these other commitments. Well, if you have to satisfy each bucket, can you stack certain buckets where, okay, it's very easy to attach a low intensity aerobic session with a short lift just to get the touch in, right?
Yep.
Just to get the easy consistency and create that habit. So I think that's another important piece when you look at things from the macro perspective and down. But you also talked about the aerobic side being the focal point. Talk to me a little bit about intensity. And is that something, and we've kind of had this conversation a bunch, but where does intensity, and we'll keep it like, to the erg and stuff like that, right? Because that's obviously a piece that, right, like if you're part of a summer program, a lot of that is already being taken care of with your team. You guys are probably doing a lot of intensity, which my opinions on summer programs vary, and in regards to racing all throughout the summer and not really taking a step back to prioritize training, but we'll get to that here in a minute or later on. But talk to me about, from just a training perspective, like intensity, and why, in your belief and in my belief as well, like maybe we could probably benefit from taking a little bit of a step back with a lot of that. Now, again, I'm not saying there's never a time to go intense, but you don't need to be doing, 8x500 on a weekly basis to try to do this or that, right? Like, talk a little bit about that in terms of like the actual into the weeds of maybe some of the erg stuff and some of the stuff that athletes can be focusing on to get better fitness and more comfortable in the erg.
Yeah. I mean, I think the easiest and simplest way to put it is most of your summer training should be pretty easy, like steady state, conversational pace training. And, maybe once or twice a week, you pick something hard to do. And when you're picking something hard to do, I think that's where it can get a little more nuanced of what are you aiming for in the fall. So like for our athletes, when we return, we test 30 minutes on the erg. So with a test of that duration, if it were me, the days that I would be doing something hard on the erg, I'd be doing something of a little bit longer duration, maybe like a 4 times 10 minutes or, 3x3K. Again, like you still have to kind of pick something that feels manageable. I think, have you ever seen Greg Hughes' presentation for US rowing on like training? Yep. I think he did it during COVID, and he was kind of talking about like, for some people, you can sit down on the basement erg and knock out, 3x4K, 3x3K. Cool, no problem. But a lot of people have trouble knocking out a workout like that on their own. So can you knock it out, but knock it out maybe in a more manageable chunk? So like maybe you're doing it as like 30 strokes on, 10 strokes off, or 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off for 3,000 meters. And so you're breaking it up a little bit, but you're still completing, 3,000 meters each time that you set it up. Like there's like hacks like that to getting some of that longer, harder stuff done. Because I always see, like you said, I think athletes really start gravitating towards like those 500-meter pieces, the 1 minute on, 1 minute off, which like we know, we love that. Like I love a minute on, minute off, but is the minute on, minute off really setting you up for 30 minutes out of 22? Maybe it is. Maybe you're doing it 1 minute on, 1 minute off at 20 to 22. Now that's different, but I think a lot of kids are going to get on. They're just going to rip. They're going to rip those minutes, and it's like, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. You can sprinkle that in if you're really struggling one day, right? Like you get up, like I got to get on the erg, but I do not feel like doing anything long. I don't have like the attention span for it. I'm tired. Minute on, minute off. Do it, right? If that's what's going to get it done, then do it. But like play around with how can I break up something that's a little more intimidating, but still get the work in. Like there's ways that you can be creative with it. Or maybe if you're doing a 3x3K or 3x4K, you commit to just one straight through. I'm going to do the first one straight through. And then my reward for getting through that and nailing my goal split on that is going to be that I get to row the next two as 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off. But I bet you'll find like the more weeks that you stack up something like that, where even if you break it up a little bit, like, man, I've done 3x3K like 4 times this summer. like it becomes less of a thing to kind of mentally get through, and every once in a while when you're feeling it, you know, judge it by how you feel when you get up in the morning. But if you feel great, then really go to the well on the day that you feel great, and then, save the easy stuff for the days when, it's just not feeling like easy to get through something on your own.
And one of the things that you highlighted, right? So you guys said that you do 30 minutes, right? Capped at 22. That's kind of your fall test, right? That's your fall, kind of gauge of fitness, of progress. And I think that's one of the things that I think is huge for athletes. And we probably could even started with. It's like when you're fine tuning your goals, like, and again, we're going to speak in our language, which is the erg, right? We'll kind of stick to that here now that we already talked about the balance piece, right? But we'll talk a little bit about the erg, right? Which is going to be, regardless of what program you're running for, it's going to be an important piece of what you're doing in the fall. And some of the things that you can do is, okay, like what is that fall piece that you guys will be doing on a consistent basis to measure fitness and in many ways probably make boat selections and things like that out of come fall racing, right? Head of the Schuylkill if you're in Philly, or head of the Charles, or any of these other fall regattas. Like what are coaches going to be looking at predominantly? And I'm pretty confident it's not the 2K. But is it something that is in that 15 to 30 minutes type range that you guys are going to be doing on a consistent basis? And we're going to circle around to the 2K piece here because I do have a question for you regarding that. But in regards to, for 95% of the high school athletes out there, especially if you are a rising junior or below, like if you're on the erg, it doesn't need to be high intensity. But what it can be, and probably should be, especially if you're someone who does appreciate the erg, then what it can be is something based around the erg test that you're going to be seeing most frequently in the fall, which is probably something like a 30-minute test, whether it's at 22 or 24 or some kind of rate structure. For some of you, it may be a 6K test. For a lot of you, and I'm speaking more to high school athletes, it's probably a 5K test for a really large portion of you. For some, it could even be a 4K test, but it's probably something in that 15 to 30-minute type range, which to me, I think is 12-month a year kind of appropriate, right? Like you can train you can train for 30-minute testing 12 months a year, and it's probably not going to burn you physiologically too much, right? Like it's a longer endurance-based test that you can kind of train around, meaning doing a lot of stuff that is, 40 to 60 to 80 minutes and then working your way down to assess a 30-minute or 6K every once in a while. Like, I don't think you're really positioning yourself to, overtrain because you're doing that, right? Versus a 2K where the intensity is so high, like you probably need a natural step back from 2K intensity. Like 30-minute, 5K, 6K, like you can base a lot of your structure around that. And then now, and this is the way that we structure the summer training program, like it's okay, like we centered around 20-minute-ish 5K type work, because I know that those athletes in September, October, and November are going to be prioritizing 20-minute type work, 6K, 5K, 4K. Okay, well now if you're thinking about your summer in June, July, and August, and you need something that is measurable and repeatable for each of those months, can you incorporate a rate structured test each of those months to just get exposure to that distance and start to craft your training around that, right? Where it's like, hey, maybe I'm doing some prep work and then I'm doing a rate capped, 5K in the middle of July just to get a number. It doesn't have to be open rate, because very quickly when you try to do an open rate piece, right, you get 2 or 3K in and you're like, oh, why am I doing this? And then it again, just being a human, like it might not go the way that you anticipated, but you can probably do something that is 20 to 24, rate shifting, this and that, and get a complete 5K type assessment. And then you can repeat it again at the beginning of August. And then you can repeat it again at the end of August before you head to campus. And now in your summer, like what you said, you now have three or four assessments that or just good hard ergs that are centered around what you're going to be doing in the fall. and then tell me you're not confident for that first test come September. No, like you are, like you're ready to rock and roll, right? So I think that's an important piece, where it's like, hey, like athletes who are like, again, like to me, that's 12-month a year training. You can incorporate that stuff any time of year because it's not going to physiologically crush you and overtrain you or over whatever. Like it's just, you can do that stuff all throughout the year. So again, I think creating those benchmarks is a really helpful thing. My next question in alignment with that, and again, I just want to touch it because again, I think this is a common one for a lot of athletes, because the piece I want to talk about next is more like the, how do athletes kind of keep the motivation and keep a lot, or, keep, training if they don't have a group, whatever it may be. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But for the athletes, you're a college coach. For the athletes who are 100% centered on, hey, I'm told that I need to do a 2K, to get a score because offers go out in September or October, and they say that I am 8 seconds off and I need to do this or that, which I'm going to take a little bit of that before you, as you process your answer to that. But like, again, what would you say to those athletes? But to me, like, again, like, I think it's a piece of what we do as athletes, right? Again, 2K is going to be the area that a lot of coaches are looking for in the summer. Unless you're a rising senior and you are deep into recruiting conversations, meaning like coaches have given you a really specific target and goal and timeline, I don't believe that needs to be the centerpiece of your training. However, there are athletes who they have been giving very measurable targets to hit throughout the summer, which again, to me, my belief is I wish more college coaches would highlight 5K, 6K and stuff like that, so that athletes can do something that's a little bit more in alignment with their actual training, or with their program's training. But, that's a whole separate podcast. But my question for you, Delaney, is okay, for those athletes, because I'm sure you're having those conversations with some athletes as well, where it's like, hey, like, this is the score that we're looking for. Like, are there alternatives that athletes can look at? Are there conversations that they can have with coaches or other erg scores that they can send them? Or if they are being held to the fire with just the 2K test, and they don't have a training environment that they can leverage to help get them to that goal, is there a way to set those athletes up for success to maybe try to make a step forward in their 2K scores?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's being upfront with college coaches. I don't know a college coach that wouldn't say, hey, that's great, to a high school athlete who says, hey, coach, like, I know that you want my 2K score to come down to X by September. I'm really focusing on, my aerobic training this summer. We're testing 5K when we get back. And, can I send you my 5K score? Can I send you my 20-minute score? My answer is yes, right away. To be honest, I'd probably be more impressed by the maturity and patience of the high school athlete to understand like the bigger process that's going on, and understand that if I pull a solid 5K, a solid 20-minute, even a solid 4K, every college coach knows how to compute that to what more likely your 2K score is going to be eventually, right? Like it's going to give us a ballpark of like, okay, if your aerobic fitness is here on 5K, your 2K is going to be in a certain range, probably. But I think it's the maturity side of it is even bigger for me, to have an athlete who says, I'm not going to listen to the noise of like 2K, because, they might be hearing it from college coaches. But again, I think it's also, it's on us as college coaches to be, more specific that, I'd like to see your 2K here. However, there are other measures that can tell me that it's getting there if you're not training for 2K specifically right now. Like I said, we're going to understand if you say I'm training for 5K. But I think high school athletes, they get caught in the noise of like 2K score. They hear their teammates are talking about it. Their high school coaches are talking about it. Maybe even, I know you don't talk about it, but sometimes, they're talking to strength and conditioning coaches or people who are helping them with their recruiting who are talking about, well, you got to test your 2K. Their parents are talking about their 2K. So that's all they're hearing. And so for me, the maturity side of it would be so huge in the recruiting process to know that, wow, I'm talking to a kid that really understands the bigger picture of training. And that would probably incline me to even want that athlete more, because guess what we do in college? 6K, 30-minute, like we're not testing 2K in September, and we're not talking about it over the summer. So you're going to be better prepared, for the next step if you can understand the bigger picture of how the training cycle all connects together. A fast 5K is going to put out a fast 2K at some point. The 2K test can take some refinement a little bit more than maybe a 5K can, but you'll get there. If your aerobic fitness is in the range for the 2K score you want, you'll get there. Like, it just might take a little bit of refinement. So,
yeah, I love that answer. That's a great answer, and I think it's a very important one. Like, how can you block out the noise, right? Because that's all you're going to be hearing, and it is what all you're hearing, right? And I hear it all the time in what I do, but I think it's such a valuable conversation. I think that, again, like it might fall on a lot of deaf ears, but hopefully some athletes can kind of understand that and grasp it, and hopefully some coaches can understand that, where it's like, hey, like, okay, like, if 5K, again, like we said, like you can train for 5Ks in 30 minutes and so on and so forth, and put yourself through very high intensity endurance type tests, right? Stuff that is that 15 to 30 minutes or even longer, and coaches can extrapolate valuable information. I think the messaging that all these athletes hear is just, give me a 2K score. Okay, well, all of a sudden, all that leads to is an athlete doing nothing but 500-meter pieces, then retest 2K, 500-meter pieces, retest 2K. Oftentimes they're by themselves, they're in their basement, they're in the garage, and they're just demotivating themselves. And they're now all of a sudden no longer motivated by training, because all they're doing is operating in this peak of, I have to push my 2K further and I'm trying to squeeze out one more second. And they don't realize that there's this whole base level underneath. And the 2K is a byproduct of a very, very valuable or very well-structured base. And okay, well, 30 minutes, 6K, 5K, these kinds of things can help slowly elevate that base, so that now when you go to do a 2K, it's now operating at a higher level, right? You can now reach for more when you're doing that high intensity stuff. And I think the thing that I tell, and again, this could be a whole nother podcast, we're getting into it a little bit now anyway, because I think it's valuable. But the thing that I like to tell athletes is, if 5K is what you guys are doing in the fall, right? And say your 2K is 8 minutes and your current 5K is like a 2:08. Okay, like your 5K from last fall. If you're able to structure your training around the 5K, not only is it going to be better for your performance or for, where you're trying to go in the fall, right? Selection and this and that, right? Developing your base. But if all of a sudden at that little test that you do at the end of August, and all of a sudden you go 2:04 for 5K, well, guess what? That now tells college coaches who actually know how to extrapolate things. Oh, without question, this athlete is, bordering 750 type fitness, if not better, right? Because it's usually about that 6 to 8, probably, right? Again, every coach probably has different calculators based off the data that they have. But rule of thumb, right? A good, well-executed 5K is probably 6 to 8, right? If for, high school athletes, like more so, 6 to 8 split difference. So if you're taking your 5K from a 2:08 down to a 2:04 in one summer, well, guess what that tells me as a coach? Oh, this athlete's without question under 158 to 156 for 2K. Like, I don't need them to test 2K. Keep driving that 5K home. How low can you go with that score? Because that's going to keep telling me, okay, I may not have had the piece, the race, the test that tells me I am 750 or below fitness, but at least now I have the base that's saying you have the fitness to get there soon. So now they're structuring their training now around driving that 5K home, driving that 30-minute home, which to me, based off my information, is about 10 splits above 2K, right? If it's a rate capped at a 24. Okay, well, let me do a 30-minute test, because again, I've never done one before. It's low rate. I have time to breathe between each stroke, and it's kind of fun. I can lay into it a little bit more. Okay, well, my first time doing it, I am 155, right? But my goal is to go 640 type fitness down the line. I should know that that's probably a, 150 split for 5K. Okay, well, how can I go from that 155 to as close to 150 for 30-minute over the course of the summer, which then tells me, okay, I'm tracking in the right direction to go close to 640. Anyway,
Right.
I digress,
Yeah.
but that's
It's funny
that's
because
an important piece.
I wrote down earlier when we were talking about structuring summer training, like PR versus like just maintaining fitness. And I think like that's another piece of it, especially for athletes that are getting further into their rowing career. So, like collegiate athletes, especially, we're not really asking you to come back and PR in September. I mean, if you come back and PR in September, then I know you did some serious work over the summer, and that's huge. But if you can come back and be within 3 split seconds of your PR, I know that you trained over the summer, And I think it's like you can take some of that pressure off. Kids are like out here like, I got a PR all the time. Got a PR on my 2K, got a PR on my 30. Like, you will, but you have to be patient, and give yourself a little bit of space, especially over the summer. Like, you don't need to have that level of stress on it. Train to get fit. If you train to get fit, the erg score will come as a byproduct of that. Just like you're saying with the 2K will be the byproduct of the 5K score eventually. So it's like there's so much pressure. That's like the other side of it. And like you said, then they're out there like every week doing 6 by 500, this and that. And it's like, you know what? You would benefit from just 60 minutes of steady state so much more than 6 by 500, every week. So that I always like, it's the swing, right? Like, oh, well, I got a PR. I'd love that. But if you come back within 3, like I said, I'm very happy. You did a solid body of work over the summer if you can come back and be within 3 split seconds of your PR.
Yeah. I think one thing that's actionable for high school athletes, especially, that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. But I've talked about this before, but I'm gonna bring it up again now. But again, like, because there are athletes who do feel like they're, regardless of what we say here, there are athletes who are going to feel like they're completely tied to 2K performance, and trying to get 2K in, which again, like, that's a separate conversation for those athletes individually, where it's like, hey, my coach is adamant that I got to do this or that, which again, I think does us a disservice in the long run, but it just in the fabric of college coach or college rowing. But I think if you were to get an email from an athlete that said, hey, Coach McGuire, reaching out to you, I'm just looking to get a little bit more clarity on and to be able to shape my summer so that I can be a top end recruit for you at Eastern Michigan. Like, would I'm centering my training around 6K this summer. Like, what would be a viable target for me to approach that is similar to, or that you would be looking for, or that athletes would be targeting, right? Again, I'm not trying to make it specific to a school or anything like that, but it's like, if I were to get an email from an athlete like that who said, hey, Coach Leslie, I'm just, a little bit, I'm very interested in your program. I'm trying to get a little bit more clarity on some, erg targets. I'm not really focusing on 2K here in the summer, but I am focusing on 5K. And if that's a test that you guys do at your boathouse, maybe you do 6K, but is there something that I can, center my training around that is tangible, that it is an objective goal? Like, is that something that is, again, like, that you would be like, well, no, I want you to do 2K? Like, how would you answer something like that?
Oh yeah, no, I'd be again excited, because it's like the rare person that would understand kind of the bigger effect of what you're doing. Like that's, and even just the ability for an athlete to reach out and have that conversation. Like, I wish more athletes understood, like, we're just people and we're here to get to know you and also try to help you through the recruiting process. Like, we're not just like, I'm interested, I'm not, it's not like swiping on like a dating app. That's not what's going on here. Like, we want to help you guys. And we know that there's a lack of information at the juniors level in a lot of areas as to like how to navigate the recruiting process. So like ask questions, you know, and I wish more athletes would be just more candid about, you know, really where they're at. Cause I feel like there is this need to kind of put on a face for college coaches and try to act, you know, a certain way to attract, you know, whether they want a scholarship or whatever it might be. I'd rather you just be honest and be yourself, because, you know, when you get on campus, there's no more lying. Like, we're going to see the level of fitness that you're really at when you get here. And I think we talked about this on a previous podcast, but it's like when those expectations and reality don't meet up, then you're unhappy, we're unhappy. So be as open and honest as you can in the recruiting process and ask questions like that. Like, I love that. I love when athletes have questions. It's always like a red flag to me when I ask an athlete if they have questions and they're like, no, I don't have any questions. I'm like, oh my God, you know everything already? There's no way. I don't even know everything. So yeah, that would thrill me if an athlete reached out like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, to me, like, if, you know, when I was coaching, like, if I were to get at questions like that, which I don't think I ever got, I wish I did, that'd be great. But like, it'd be like, hey, like, just to give you a little bit of insight, like, we test 30-minute in the fall. Most of the athletes who are contributing to our 3V were ranging around this target. Our athletes that were 1V contributors were around this target, and then everyone else was in the middle. Like, hey, maybe this gives you a good starting platform to gauge your training on throughout the summer, right? Like, can you center your training around maybe trying to put up a 30-minute test that's similar to that, or a 6K test, right? Like, just because they do 5K in the fall doesn't mean that they can't do 30-minute in the, you know, summer to help gauge their progress, or to gauge where they are relative to a certain program. And then if I'm a coach, I can immediately be like, oh man, they just broke 150. Well, that beat all these kids on my team. Like, that's pretty good. You know, it's like, so again, that's just another easy, you know, or thing that I think a lot of, at least college coaches who hopefully are listening, you know, can maybe think about too, but also high school athletes to just ask that question. Right. I think that's an important piece. But I think one of the areas that I do want to talk about, right, and I'm gonna be conscious of what you got going on, but talking about like motivation for summer training, athletes who are, you know, where it's like, okay, like how do they kind of fight the resistance of, hey, or the loss of motivation, or how can they keep themselves motivated? What are some things that they can do or incorporate or think about to help keep that fire burning throughout the summer, but obviously minimizing it and increasing it over certain periods, right? Because you can't be fully on the whole time, or once you get to September, you're probably going to be a little bit burnt, right? But keeping that fire going to help, again, bridge that gap and get to September feeling energized. Like, what would you say to some of those athletes? I think that's kind of like an important piece for any athlete out there that we can spend a little bit of time on, to kind of help those athletes out there who are trying to get to September prepared to now take that next step once they do get back on campus. How would you, answer that or think about that?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is it's normal for motivation to kind of come and go for everybody throughout the year at different times, but there's things that you can do to set yourself up on the days when the motivation is low to still execute. So like the first thing that comes to mind for me, and we've talked about this before, is set a time that is your time to get your workout in. I know you're a morning person. I'm a morning person. So I am probably like 99% consistent with waking up in the morning and getting my workout done, especially in the summer when we don't have practice, because I can do that. And it helps because I get into this rhythm where, you know, I don't wake up every day like thrilled that I'm going to go work out, but my alarm goes off. I've already set up the rest of my day, assuming that I got a workout in already. So I know if I don't do it now, I'm probably not going to get it done because I've stacked up, you know, calls and meetings and stuff the rest of the day. So that motivates me at least to get out of bed and at least like get moving a little bit, is like, well, if I don't do it now, I won't do it. So set a time, because that can become just the rhythm of the consistency of the time can help. The other thing is, I think the cross training aspect is really good for this in the summer. When you're going through the ups and downs, refresh yourself by doing something that you really like or something different, or sign up for a CrossFit class or a spin class. Like just do something totally different. Change it up. Change the space that you're going to. If you always go an erg, in the garage, take the erg outside. Like something little like that where you just kind of change the environment, change the scenery could help. Or like if you're running the same loop around the neighborhood every day, maybe you go over to the track and run, some repeats on the track or something like that. So changing the environment can help. Obviously, if you have friends around, bug people, get somebody to go out with you. Even if they don't want to do the same workout as you, if you can just like drag someone out to run 1 mile of your 5 miles with you or whatever it is, like that can get you enough motivation to at least get out the door. And then once you get going, you're like, okay, I'm glad I started. But those are, and other than that, like my own personal tricks are just like make a new playlist, things like that can just kind of refresh you, or maybe you're excited to listen to an audiobook or something that you've been, meaning to listen to, or podcast or whatever. There's all sorts of little things like that you can do, but I think pick a time, try to stick to it, change up your modality, change up your space, if necessary, and try to bring a friend if you can.
Yeah. No, I think those are all really helpful. I think like to me, like when I think about that, it's like I always like I think what you said, my belief on morning workouts is just to me, I think if you're just trying to do anything within fitness, like, and it's a priority to you, like get it done early, get it done early, get it done before the rest of your day gets started. And that's speaking to a rower or to an athlete of any sport, or to any individual who is trying to prioritize a healthy life. It's like, can you get up and just get that workout in? And if you can't, like, can you start to figure out ways to slowly incorporate it into your routine where, okay, maybe 2 days a week, I know for a fact I am able to get in a session, before work or before school or before whatever it may be. So, you and I are both the same in that regard, where it's like, hey, like, I think we're both really, really consistent with training because we get it done early before the rest of our day interferes. And we're, both of us have a lot of stuff going on throughout the day, and we also have a lot of freedom. But even with freedom to kind of create some schedules and stuff like that, there's always things that are going to be thrown your way throughout the day. They're going to throw you off course. And then not only is that particular session at risk of not happening, more or also along those lines, that specific session may happen, but the quality is going to be diminished significantly, right? We all think that, hey, we don't have the energy to get up and train in the morning. Well, like you said, as soon as you get the legs moving a little bit, you're slowly going to be able to build on it. And now you're talking about a completed session in the morning versus a potentially incomplete or potentially just unmotivated session in the evening, right? Because you had to try to fit it in around everything else that was going on in your day. The other piece is also heat, right? It's hot in the summer, especially up here in the Northeast. It's like 90 degrees every day for the last couple of days. It's like, that's where the morning session can be really helpful. And I think those are incredibly important things that athletes can, again, like, can you get 2 of those in a week, right? And maybe you build it over time, right? Where you can do 2 or 3 or 4. But I think that's an incredibly valuable piece that you have 100% control of.
Yep.
And then this brings me to another little piece that I wanted to highlight is like controlling your environment to help better prepare you for consistency with your training. Because at the end of the day, if you're just consistent with your training, take all of it out of it, right? If you do the same thing every day, right? Now, again, ideally you want balance, like we talked about prior, but it's like, if you just wake up and you're getting in, 40 minutes of low intensity volume, you're going to be better in the long run than the athlete who does some high intensity workout once a week and then doesn't touch it again, and is very inconsistent with their intensity or with their frequency of training. So figure out a routine that best sets you up for success, and then control your environment to better guide you in actually getting the workout done. If your garage is 95 degrees like mine is, right? Can you wheel a fan around? Can you also have a towel prepared so that when you're 15 minutes into the erg piece and your hand gets all sweaty, you're no longer thinking about just stopping. You can just grab that towel next to you and just wipe the handle down, right? Like, do you have your water next to you, so that you can grab a drink of water if need be? Are you structuring the workout itself where, hey, like if you plan to do 10K, okay, well, maybe you're doing 750 on, 250 off times 10. So those little tricks can help get you to a level of consistency, and the intensity is going to come down the line. You don't necessarily need to worry about that, right? Because the moment you start to apply intensity and it doesn't go your way, it's very easy to let that unravel, and now you're not doing it. Yep. But can you be very specific with how you're controlling your environment, right? If you're trying to wake up in the morning and go work out, are your clothes set out, right? Is your coffee already prepped the night before? Like what is that routine looking like for you? And can you do that 2 times per week? Yep. And then create those habits. I think that's a huge thing to help get you to better adhere to consistency. Another piece, and I'll let you kind of finish it off, but like if you do have a summer job that takes away from your ability to wake up, right? So you have to be at a summer campsite by 7 a.m., right? Not everyone's going to wake up at 5 days a week and go train, right? Myself included, probably, right? That's tough, right? Like I do it for the most part all the time, but if that's my only option, that's going to be challenging. Okay, well, if the summer camp is 5 days and only on weekdays, maybe you do have 2 days off in your week, but now you're taking advantage of Saturday and Sunday to get in some training because you don't have anything going on, right? And you can kind of be a little bit more consistent with that. So that's kind of another piece, right? Controlling your environment, I think, is a massive one. But I know you have recruiting stuff going on and conversations that, throughout the rest of your day, but any last things on controlling your environment and setting yourself up for success with your training and all that? Any last things that are helpful for you?
Yeah, I think you hit it all right on the head. It's really like it's being prepared ahead of time. Like, especially like you said, if you're going to get up in the morning, set your stuff out the night before. So you can maximize your sleep in the morning. You don't have to think about it when you get up. Also, just like you said, like training in the heat and stuff in the summer, make sure that like you've got what you need to get through the session. Like have water, have Gatorade, have, a snack if you need it. Like there's no shame in breaking the session up. I just ran on Saturday. It was like, 95 degrees here on Saturday. So I looked at the weather on Friday night and I was like, I have a 15-mile run on Saturday morning. I'm going to get up early. I got up at like 4:30. I was out the door by 5. So, I got most of my run in before the sun was like actually up. Brought a water bottle with me, planned a route where I could refill my water bottle at a water fountain. Like, you can plan ahead a little bit and it helps you be successful and complete the session. But also, like you can have some grace with yourself. Like you said, like if you're up at 7 a.m. and every day to go to work and, you try to get up at 5:30 or whatever to get a quick 40 minutes in, and your alarm goes off and your body's telling you to sleep, then sleep, like you don't have to force it all the time. But also, like you said, if you can get 1 or 2 per week, if you can start building it up, you'll probably find that it's the feeling afterwards. I don't know if you feel this way, but I look forward to the feeling after I'm done of like, all right, I feel great. I got a great sweat in, the hardest part of my day is done. And now I don't have to worry about anything but making calls and emails and texts the rest of the day. Like that's easy. You just feel really good afterwards. So maybe that's what motivates you to get out the door, is just the after feeling, not necessarily how you feel during it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge one. And we could do a whole nother podcast on all that stuff. Cause again, that's a huge thing for me, just habits and consistency and how can you create that. And we probably will at some point, but we will do a whole nother podcast on something like that at some point, because I'm going to have you on, again very soon as we get going in the summer. But Delaney, as always, this was an awesome conversation. Any last things from you in regards to what you guys got going on, and then we can close things out. But obviously I'll be seeing you in a couple weeks here in Philly as we kick off July and August sessions, which I think are going to be a blast as we really maximize those 2 months. But any last things from you before we wrap things up?
If you're a high school rower or a parent who's interested in learning more about the recruiting process, wants to hear about college recruiting, reach out. I can talk to juniors, rising juniors and seniors now. DM me, email me. I think my email is on my Instagram. I'm sure Kevin will tag me in clips on this. So reach out. I'd love to chat. So.
Awesome. Well, Delaney, thank you again. I will see you in a couple weeks when you're out here, and good luck as you prep to come back to Philly, and then as you get ready for IDR. But again, this was a great conversation. Athletes are going to get a lot of value from this, and do it again soon.
Thanks, Kev.